Farshid's going to talk for about 30 minutes. He's got a PowerPoint giving some of the background. And then we decided there's a very good documentary about the Stait of Hormuz, the history of it, and why this is one of the most important waterways in the world. And of course, the conflict between Trump and the Iranian government, a lot of it is revolving around the Stait of Hormuz. So I think you're going to find that really interesting. And then in the last half hour, we'll have lots of time for questions and answers. So without any more, please welcome Farshid Vahedian.
Hello everyone. First, I want to thank...
Closer to the mic.
Louder.
Sure. Oh. First, I wanted to thank friends of Mon Diablo Peace and Justice Center, and especially dear friend of mine, Rick Sterling, for inviting me to have a meet with you guys and have a chat. The main purpose of my presentation today is not to give you the latest and the hottest news about what's going on in Middle East, and especially the war between Iran, United States, and Israel. My purpose for this presentation is to give you the main roots and the factors that made this event to happen in this moment of time. And by giving these two factors and the roots, I hope that at the end of this meeting you will have some clear understanding to analyze all the news that every day we are bombarded by the media, mainstream media. To do this presentation, I have to go back to the history, like more than 50 years ago, when the legal government of Dr. Muhammad Mossadegh is being toppled by a coup d'etat by United States with the help of intelligence of the British MI6 and MI5. As a result of this coup d'etat, United States managed to install a dependent government of Mohammad Reza Shah. Yeah, let me check. It's better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Managed to install a government.
Closer.
Sure, sure. It's almost to swallow. Yeah. Help to install the government of Mohammad Reza Shah, the deceased Shah, totally independent of imperialism. And from this moment of time till the starting of Islamic Revolution, the success of the Islamic Revolution, you have one of the most important vassal state in the Middle East, or the name that is today is more prevalent, West Asia. And the second pillar was Israel. So why there is two main pillar, why there is a selection of Israel and Iran as the two main pillars? There are so many different geopolitical reasons to pick these two. Apart from these geopolitical reason, there is some ethnicity and religious differences. You know, Israel is its identity defined by a Jewish state and Islamic Republic. The majority of the population in Islamic Republic are Shiite, a branch of it, and these two states are among all the other countries as a major Arab states which has the Sunni religion. What happened after Iranian Revolution? One of these two main pillars actually lost. And from that moment till now, the United States needs to rely on the next pillar, Israel, and also some non-governmental forces like ISIS. So the new proxies are these two, basically. And there are a lot of very famous statements to transfer this main idea that happened after the Iranian Revolution. For example, Netanyahu in some point of time said that we are fighting not only to preserve the Jewish nation and the Jewish state, but to preserve civilization against the barbarians. Mr. Biden said that if there was no Israel, we would have to create one. And lately, Merz, German chancellor, said that this is the dirty war that Israel is doing for all of us. So you can see, you can get the picture how important after the Iranian Revolution, the role of Israel becoming so much important. One thing that started after the victory of Iranian Revolution, one of the priority of United States became to regime change in Iran. And this idea of the regime change in Iran was not a new idea. In one of the interviews that Michael Hudson, you may know him, a very famous economist, who this interview was done with Ben Norton, and he mentioned about he was presented in a meeting in mid of 1970, and 1970, the date is very important because it even goes back to the time that Shah was in power in Iran. And there were some discussion between the group of the State Department and the Pentagon regarding that, what is the plan if one of the countries in the Middle East wanted to go by its own independent and doesn't want to abide by whatever diktat made by United States. And specifically the name of Iran came out. And they said in case of Iran, we have to attack Balochistan. And where is Balochistan located? Balochistan is located in southeastern of Iran, the region, which has border with Pakistan and Afghanistan. And they said that as a lever to force Iranian to go back under the dependence of the United States, we have to attack this area and try to take it out from the sovereign government of Iranian as a lever to force them back. So my main point is that regime change in Iran is not a new thing that only started after the revolution, but it was after the revolution becoming more and more, it has more and more priority in the United States agenda. And I can list a number here. I will list a number of the different means that United States, from right after the revolution, just a few months after success of the Iranian Revolution, they took this to do the regime change. Few months, a number of the United States forces actually deployed in the middle of one desert, in the middle of Iran, with the pretext to free the hostages that, American hostages that was in the United States Embassy in Tehran. It was failed actually, but this was the plan. After that, there is a coup d'etat plan and try to execute in one of the major air base by a number of the high-ranking military forces remain from the Shah army. It was botched again. And another coup that was made by the first president, Iranian president, Bani Saad, and by the help of a lot of terrorist groups that received very much support and help from outside, to kill a number of the high-ranking Iranian leaders. And they were successful. They killed a lot of people in that moment of time. And finally, when all these means was not resulted to the right regime change, the war between Iraq and Iran started with the instigation of United States. And the first aim for starting this war was to tripwire a very important portion of Iranian country, which is oil rich and is located in the southwest of Iran, Khuzestan, named Khuzestan. This was the first aim of attacking Iraq to Iran. And after finishing this war, again, totally different ways of trying to weaken Iranian government and to try to prepare the final aim still was in the agenda by using the different sanctions, cyber war, and assassination of the Iranian scientists and so on and so forth, till right now was continuing. This was specifically, this situation specifically between United States and Iran. But meanwhile, in the international arena, a lot of things has changed. Especially after 1990s, mid of the 1990s, the big change was the end of the Cold War. And what is the effect of end of Cold War was that before that, the two superpowers, United States and Soviet Union, they somehow divided all the region of the world. Other than this division, there were some area that by unwritten, untold agreement became some kind of the buffer zone, which was acknowledged by both superpowers as the places that they are not allowed to meddle. This belonged to the other side. And Iran was the buffer zone for the Soviet Union, even if the Iranian government, totally dependent of United States, but it defined as a buffer zone. Why? Because it has a very long border with Soviet Union, and also it has the very proximity, it's located in the very proximity of the Soviet Union. And one of the reasons Iranian revolution actually succeeded in a very short time was the very serious threat that Soviet Union made at the time before succeeding of the Iranian revolution, told to United States not to meddle. But after collapse of Soviet Union, this type of the buffer zone totally removed, and Iran has to stay by its own without any support outside. And the new player that right now you can see in the arena of the international, like China at that time was very weak. So United States becoming a single superpower all over the world. One of the reasons of that, a number of the United States elites, like Wolfowitz, like Dick Cheney, like Rumsfeld, they sit together and prepare some kind of the document as a roadmap to how to maintain this supremacy of United States for the next coming year, coming century, 21st century. And the name of this document tells about the content of this document. Project for the New American Century, or PNAC. And what is the content of this document? The content of this document is that the United States should not allow any potential rival state to reach to a level that can introduce itself as an enemy or as a rival to United States. This is the whole content of this document. And they, through this document, try to show different ways and the potential countries who may get to this level. As a result of that, if you remember, Wesley Clark, a retired general, he talked in an interview with the Democracy Now!, he talked about a document that some of his friends in Pentagon showed him. And through this document, it shows that there is a plan to do the regime change for 7 countries as a potential rival, as a potential hurdle to the superiority of United States. It starts from Afghanistan, from Iraq, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Syria, and at the end, and not the least important, it was Iran. And you can see in all over the years till now, for all the remaining 6, the plan was successful, and they somehow managed to change the regime in all these 6. And the only one that is remained is Iran. Especially after September 11, United States planned to attack Afghanistan. And Iranian military helped a lot Afghanistan, the United States forces, to be successful to succumbing and to get to the Afghanistan. At that time, Iranian government thought it might be a good occasion to go and have a rapprochement with United States. At that time, President Khatami, at that time the president of Iran, wrote a kind letter to Bush Jr. government and tried to invite to sit and reach to an agreement and to finish the hostility happened so far after revolution. But you know what was the answer of Bush government? They took Iranian government as one of the axis of evil. And after that, you see the intensity to pressure Iran getting more and more intensified. Yes, there are some changes due to who is in the White House. For example, in the case of the Obama, you can see the pressure actually decreased and they reached to kind of the agreement as a JCPOA, as famed. But immediately after Trump get to his first office, he tore down this agreement, and in the second round of his office, he put the maximum pressure on Iran, which finally ended up in the current war. But the condition in the international arena didn't stay the same. What happened? Especially one of the turning points was the economic crisis that happened between 2007 and 2008. At that time, and before that, nobody in the United States elite was thinking about China becoming so powerful. They were thinking with a lot of intertwined relationship between China and United States from economic point of view, and for all the difficulty that China was dealing with, sooner or later, the ruling Communist Party of China would be defeated, and China would become just a third-degree capitalist, very weak country, like something like Singapore. But apart from this forecast, totally opposite with this forecast, China came out much more stronger after 2007-2008 economic crisis. This is crisis, bear in mind that this crisis, still a lot of Western countries has not fully recovered from this crisis up to this moment. But China came much more stronger, and from that point, it raised the concern in United States elites. And from that point of time, they started to think about who gonna be the main rival of the superiority of United States. First and foremost gonna be China. And this is the reason that you can see in the National Defense Strategy document, one of them issued in 2018, and the other one just recently, 2026. China introduced as a main rival, quote unquote, enemy. And the second one is Russia and Iran, and DPR case, North Korea become third and fourth. So you can see that the architect, the arrangement in the international arena, especially after 2007 and 2008, has changed. There are two other main turning points also. One of them was the presence of the military forces, Russian military forces in Ukraine. And the other one is the October 7th of the Palestinian uprising and starting to attack Israel. These two, especially these two events, define to the United States that the superiority of United States is becoming weaker and weaker. So, the main question, what was the reason that this agenda that was in the pipe for a long time to topple Iranian government, it happened in 2006. There are two main reasons. One main reason is that it goes to, one is related to the international arena and dwindling the superiority of United States, and the one it related to the condition inside Iran. So, as I told you, all these things that happened, United States came to realize that its power, and especially its military power, is weakening. So it's better to act right now rather to postpone it for tomorrow. And the second main reason is that, at least in the eyes of United States elites and military top commander, they see that Iran is in the weakest situation. Due to this, why? Because due to this prolonged sanction, the economic condition in Iran getting worse and worse, and people are in the constant pressure. There are a lot of demonstration and opposition against Iranian government, and also this economic pain, they were thinking just by attacking Iran and decapitating the new word that is becoming so famous in these days, by decapitating the higher level of the Iranian leaders, and especially supreme leader, by killing the supreme leader, the people will rise up and again the same type of the pictures that you have seen when the United States attacked Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein will happen the same thing in Iran, which we all know that it didn't happen. So these are these two main reasons. And finally, what is the real situation right now? There is no unipolar world anymore. What we can see are emerging is the multipolar world. And what is the reason for that? China is becoming more and more stronger and getting closer and closer to Russia. Russia, by the help of the China, getting more and more stronger. And the traditional alliances between all the puppet regime that you can see in the West Asia and in other part of the world are getting totally dismantled, and even the vassal state trying to look for the new type of the alliances. They are looking for the new way of the alliances. And the final word from my side is that the U.S. can no longer act. U.S. can no longer act as the sole policeman of the world without facing consequences. That's all. Thank you. So, Rick, do you want to start the video?
Yeah, we'll go back to it, please.
Okay. So as Rick mentioned, this is around 30 minutes that giving you another side of the narration, because you are familiar, at least one side of the narration, what you heard from the Western media. This is the way that Iranian narrate the same story. And this is directly downloaded from the Press TV, Iranian broadcasting system.
February 28th, 2026. In the middle of indirect negotiations between Washington and Tehran, while diplomats were still busy arranging words across the negotiating tables in Muscat and Doha, the White House chose a different path. After having attacked Iran earlier that summer, right in the midst of the talks, it had promised to respect the diplomatic process from then on. Yet, despite that promise, it struck the negotiating table for a second time. Tomahawk cruise missiles, launched from US warships stationed in the northern Arabian Sea and from regional bases, flew with the precise coordinates of a single target: the residence of the leader of the Islamic Revolution of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. A secondary target, perhaps, was the meeting of Iran's Supreme Defense Council, where senior military commanders had gathered to coordinate the country's defense. These attacks, carried out without US congressional authorization and in violation of all international norms, effectively plunged the United States of America, alongside the Israeli regime, into a full-scale war with Iran. A war that had neither the approval of the UN Security Council nor the awareness or support of global public opinion. It appeared that Trump, under pressure from the Epstein scandal, was seeking to ignite a major conflict in West Asia as an escape route. Tehran, calling the strike an act of state terrorism, shifted its strategy from diplomacy to maximum deterrence. The first step was to target all American economic interests across West Asia. At the center of this deterrence stood one of the lifelines of the global economy, the Stait of Hormuz. This brought the strait and its developments back into the spotlight of major international media. I've been making military documentaries for more than 20 years. Since 2007, I've traveled through this region and witnessed firsthand the importance of this vital artery. What you see in this documentary is the result of my archival research and field observations. The story of a strait. In the heart of West Asia lies a 167-kilometer maritime choke point that holds the pulse of the world economy. This is the Stait of Hormuz, the only gateway from the Persian Gulf to the Indian Ocean. The strait is not merely a geographic location, it's a full-fledged geopolitical equation. Alongside Bab el-Mandab and Malacca, the Stait of Hormuz is the third most critical maritime trade route in the world. At its entrance, two official corridors have been defined, each carrying strategic weight in the balance of power. The northern corridor is the backbone of maritime traffic and the route for giant oil tankers. It passes north of Abu Musa Island, an island that serves as Iran's monitoring station over this passage. Ships in this corridor travel very close to Iranian territorial waters. The southern corridor, however, plays a secondary role today. Controlled by Oman, it's mostly used by local boats, and before 1900 was the main route for pirate activity.
ما آب بین المللی در خلیج فارس نداریم. آب ایران. ما آبراه بین المللی داریم. این از تو در واقع آبهای ما عبور میکنه، تو جزایر ما عبور میکنه. آبراه بین المللی. اشتباهی که امریکایی‌ها میکنن خیال میکنن اینجا آب بین المللی است. اینجا فلات قاره است. آبهایی که کمتر از عمق 200 متر باشه یا ادامه خشکی‌های یک مملکت در زیر آب را که عمق آن کمتر از 200 متر باشه بهش میگن فلات قاره. تو فلات قاره هر آنچه که زیر هست در میارن مشترک بین دو. ببین الان فروزان مال ماست، مرجان مال عربستانه، مشترک. چاهای فارس جنوبی بخشش مال ماست، بخشش شاهین و ماهین و اینا مال قطره. اینا مشترک. این یعنی چی داره به ما میگه؟ یعنی شما آب بین المللی وجود نداره، یا آن یا اون.
Here is the Portuguese fort on Deshma Island, and these are the remains of the Portuguese fort on Hormuz Island. On Larek Island, the same fort can be seen. The three islands, that is, Larek, Hormuz and Deshma, are positioned around the strait in this formation. A triangle that once gripped the lifeblood of Persian Gulf trade on one side and the route to India on the other.
اون از اون برای دنیا برداشته اومده در خلیج فارس. خلیج فارسی که نه نفت داشته نه گاز داشته اون زمان. شما 1508 میلادی چی داشته؟ چی نبوده دیگه. اینجا که منطقه چیزی نبوده. اما اینجا یک آبراه مهم تجاری بوده.
The sensitive point in this equation is the position of the three islands, Abu Musa, the Greater Tomb, and the Lesser Tomb. They sit exactly between the two corridors. Abu Musa lies on the northern edge of the southern corridor and adjacent to the northern corridor. The Tomb Islands, like sentinels, overlook all routes of passage.
یه تنگه است. جزیره توم بزرگ، جزیره توم کوچیک، نزدیکی. اون موسا. اینجا ساحل ماست. مثلا اینجا لنگه است. این لنگه است. به مثلثی رو تشکیل میدن. عمیق‌ترین جای خلیج فارس
اینجا کریدور رفته.
اینجاست. یک کریدور از این وره
برگشته.
یک کریدور از این ور برمیگرده. یعنی توم بزرگ. اگر شما این از دست بدید، تنگه هرمز از دست بدید.
In reality, the Stait of Hormuz is governed between this triangle and the triangle of Larek, Qeshm, and Hormuz. In the 17th century, the Portuguese occupied these islands. They built forts here and executed part of the local population with a device resembling a guillotine to force the rest into forced labor. That guillotine is now preserved as a symbol of those times in the remains of the Portuguese fort on Iran's Hormuz Island. I am here in the heart of these 6 islands to begin a story rarely told in history. The year is 1904. Without firing a single shot, British warships occupied Iran's 3 islands, Abu Musa, the Greater Tomb, and the Lesser Tomb. The southern sheikhs gathered under the flag of the empire, and Britain seized the throat of the Persian Gulf. The pirates on the southern parts of the Persian Gulf were transformed into the trucial states under British protection. From the northernmost point of the Persian Gulf to the Stait of Hormuz, the narrowest point of this vital waterway, The region was now called Britain's Lake, a mocking term used in London for waters whose northern and southern shores were both under British control. 4 decades later, the Qajar dynasty fell. A British-backed coup placed Reza Khan Mir Panj, a soldier once trained under British advisors, on the throne. The Pahlavi monarchy began under Britain's shadow. After some time, Reza Shah seemed to forget he was Britain's man and could not act outside the boundaries of that arrangement. He moved towards building a modern army, especially a navy, a game in which one side of the board was controlled by the British minister plenipotentiary, who safeguarded Britain's interests in the Persian Gulf. In Tehran, Sir Robert Clive, the British minister plenipotentiary, sifted through confidential reports. A seasoned diplomat representing an empire that had ruled the Persian Gulf for a century. Across the negotiating table sat Abdul Hussein Teymurtaj, Reza Shah's powerful court minister. The subject of discussion, the three islands, Iran's sovereignty over its southern waters, and the future of Britain's lake, a lake Iran insisted on calling the Persian Gulf. In those same years, in the waters of the Persian Gulf, another man stood on the deck of the gunboat HMS Shoreham, scanning the horizon. Captain Alan Poland, commander of the Royal Navy forces in the Persian Gulf. He held this position from 1937 to 1939. From the deck of his ship, Poland monitored every movement of Iran's small fleet and sent his reports to Whitehall. Britain was watching the activities of Iran's newly established navy with extreme attention. In Tehran, Clive wrote in his confidential notes that the Iranians were notorious for signing agreements and known for refusing to ratify them. But history tells a different story. From 1900 until that day, Britain had not honored a single treaty with the Qajars and had begun and continued the occupation of the three islands without any legal document. This time, shifting the blame onto someone else was not going to be easy. In 1932, the Imperial Iranian Navy was officially born. But this force was nothing like what Reza Shah envisioned in his dreams. 2 Babr-class gunboats named Babr or Tiger and Palang or Leopard, 4 patrol boats, and 6 small coastal craft. A fleet whose total weight was less than that of a single medium-sized British warship. And this was the entirety of Reza Shah's naval power. None of these vessels had been built in Iran, and none could be repaired inside the country. Iran still had no shipbuilding industry and had acquired none of the necessary technologies. Britain refused to sell any armed vessels to Iran. Frustrated and angered by British behavior, Reza Shah conceived a dangerous idea. To meet his naval needs, he turned to Britain's ideological rival, Mussolini's Italy, which was gradually drifting towards fascism. Italy not only built the ships, but also sent its advisors and instructors to the southern waters to train Iranian crews. This meant that Britain now faced warships whose commands were spoken not in English, but in Italian. In Whitehall, British officials sifted through the confidential reports. From the deck of the Shoreham, Captain Poland described Iran's fleet as small, immature, and lacking real operational capability. The officials in Whitehall decided to approach the matter with some patience Iran's navy was still not large enough to reach the Strait of Hormuz. Reza Shah's Persian Gulf squadron was anchored in the ports of Khorramshahr and Abadan, not near the strait. This was not a strategic choice, but a logistical necessity. There, at the mouth of the Shatt al-Arab, lay the deepest waters suitable for docking gunboats. There were repair facilities, warehouses, and most importantly, the region's largest oil refinery. The Babr was stationed in Khorramshahr and the Palang in Abadan. Their mission, however, was far from Reza Shah's ambitions. These two gunboats were suitable only for patrolling the northern parts of the Persian Gulf and combating smuggling. Occasionally, they escorted Iranian merchant ships and showed the flag. Controlling the Stait of Hormuz required a real navy, and Reza Shah did not have one. So the strait was not yet in danger. But suddenly, something happened that sharply escalated tensions in the Persian Gulf. Iran wanted at least to have control over Qishm Island. This island is the largest landmass in the Persian Gulf and has absolute oversight over the entrance and exit of the Stait of Hormuz. For 100 years, the British had maintained a base in the Basidu area of Qishm Island. This base, located right at the entrance of the Persian Gulf, was like a knife pressed against the throat of the Stait of Hormuz. From this position, Britain monitored the passage of all ships. Iran, however, wanted the island for itself. One morning in 1935, Admiral Ghulam Ali Bayandor, commander of the Imperial Iranian Navy, issued the order to attack from the deck of the Babr. Iran's small fleet moved towards Qishm. The attack was sudden. British forces in Basidu were caught off guard. After an hour of fighting, the tricolour flag of Iran was raised over the century-old British base. Bayandor retook the area from the British by force of arms. In Whitehall, the news exploded like a bomb. The British commander transmitted the report of the attack and awaited orders. But the order he expected, a retaliatory strike, did not come from London. The British were furious, but they knew that a military confrontation with Iran at that moment was not in their interest. So they took the matter to the Assembly of International States. They knew from experience that in such forums, power speaks first. But this became the turning point in Britain's story in the Persian Gulf. This time, they were mistaken. Muhammad Ali Farouqi, the top figure in Reza Shah's inner circle, was chosen to defend Iran's rights before the tribunal. Farouqi was a seasoned intellectual and a master diplomat who traveled to Geneva. Britain's assessment was that despite Farouqi's presence, the outcome would be easy, because he was deeply tied to Britain and was a senior member of its Masonic Lodge in Iran. They believed he was a man who might yield under Western pressure. But Farouqi presented Iran's case before the International Court of Arbitration with such solid historical and logical arguments that London suddenly found itself in an unexpected dead end. The judges unanimously ruled in favor of Iran, and the Basidu region was returned to Iranian control. Britain had no choice but to accept that it must evacuate Basidu. But this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a far greater fear. In the confidential reports exchanged between Whitehall, the authorities of British India, and the political residency of the Persian Gulf, a new anxiety was emerging. If the issue of the three islands, Bahrain and the Stait of Hormuz, were ever brought before an international assembly, the ruling of the International Court of Arbitration might once again favor Iran. This was the most terrifying scenario for Britain, because if the three islands were returned to Iran, the country would effectively become the dominant power over the Stait of Hormuz. The concept of Britain's lake would collapse forever, and the lake would once again be called the Persian Gulf.
خلیج فارس، سینوس پارتیکوس، پروشاوان، 6 زبان اینجا پسوند فارسی داره. اینو نمیتونن اسم اینو عوض کنن. این جزایری که تو اون بود، مردم ما توش بودن. ما اصلا تو اون بلو رفتیم، نخت داشت، خونه داشت، 11 تا چاه داشت. مردم اونجا زندگی میکردن. انگلیسی ها که میان تو این جزیره مردم رو کوچ میدن.
In Tehran, after months of bargaining at the negotiating table with Taimurtaj, Richard Clive had reached a dead end. Every time the subject of the three islands, those that overlooked the Stait of Hormuz, was raised, Taimurtaj repeated the same answer. The islands are an inseparable part of Iranian territory. Clive, having lost hope in the court minister's flexibility, sent a confidential telegram to the British Foreign Office in London. His message was brief but direct. As long as Taimurtaj remains in charge, no agreement with Iran over the islands is possible. He is an inflexible piece on the board. London received the message. A few months after that telegram, Abdul Hussein Taimurtaj, the very man Clive considered the greatest obstacle to an agreement, was accused of conspiring in favor of Russia. Britain's trap worked, and Reza Shah, who valued his throne more than Iran's borders, grew suspicious of him. Taimurtaj was killed in prison on Reza Shah's orders by an injection of air. The year 1941 arrived, and with it, the storm that swept into Iran from the south. The Second World War had reached Iran's doorstep. In Whitehall, Clive was no longer present. He had left Tehran years earlier, and was now in Japan, witnessing the collapse of another world order. But the legacy of his policies to preserve Britain's lake in the Persian Gulf had taken on a life of its own. British warships were now approaching southern Iran, not with threats and negotiations, but with fire and gunpowder. Reza Shah's fledgling navy, the small fleet created in hopes of restoring national authority in the southern waters, was practically defenseless against Britain's war machine. Babr and Palang, the two gunboats once meant to symbolize Iran's return to the sea, were targeted in the very first hours of the conflict. The Babr was caught off guard in Khorramshahr, and the Palang in Abadan was disabled before it could even assume a combat formation. Admiral Bayandor, the same man who had raised Iran's flag over Basidu in Deshm just a few years earlier, could not withstand the iron tide of the Royal Navy. In the first hour of the invasion, he fell in Khorramshahr, beside the very ships he had once commanded. Iran's navy, which still lacked a cohesive command structure and operational experience, had no chance of resisting a coordinated assault from land, air and sea. Key ports fell one after another. The small Iranian fleet disintegrated within minutes. The Stait of Hormuz, the golden choke point over which Reza Shah had dreamed of asserting sovereignty, fell under full British occupation. Its security was now defined not in Tehran, but in London. Yet, what happened in 1941 was not merely a military occupation. It marked the end of the dream of building an independent naval power in Iran. And perhaps the bitter irony of history lies right here. Reza Shah, the soldier who had once risen to power through a London-backed coup, was now deposed and exiled by those same British forces. His fleet lay sunk in the harbours. The three islands remained under occupation, and the Stait of Hormuz, the very choke point he longed to control, was once again the gateway to Britain's lake. All that remained was the question whispered years earlier in the closed rooms of the royal palace. Would colonial powers ever allow Iran to dominate the Persian Gulf and the Stait of Hormuz?
Okay, was that interesting? I hope so. Give a little bit of context on the importance of the Stait of Hormuz. Of course, the colonial past was documented there, and right now we've got the U.S. up against Iran, the U.S. and Israel, rather. But so it's time for questions and answers. I'll pass the mic around to anybody who wants to ask a question. If you want to make a comment, please keep it brief. But we look forward to, your questions, and I know we've got some Iranian Americans here. Very happy to see Steve and Mahmoud, and probably there's some others as well. But who's got a question? People are overwhelmed or underwhelmed or... Well, I'll make a comment. Okay, Rich has a question here.
The Reza Shah character that was mentioned in the documentary, that's the father of the guy that we know as the Shah of Iran? Okay. Okay. Well, so I just thought I'd mention one of your slides, and I really liked how your slides sort of cut to the, made a very concise summary of the big forces involved here. One of the slides mentioned, what's his name? The guy from the Rand Institute, on the Michael Hudson slide. Now I'm blocking his name. Pardon?
Baluchistan, the region?
It was the same slide, but it was a big force in American think tanks.
The Project for a New American Century, PNAC?
Okay, what I'm getting at is that he was one of the models for Dr. Strangelove in the famous movie, but I'll remember his name in a minute. No. It was somebody that Daniel Ellsberg worked with and that Michael Hudson worked with, and so it's on the slide with Michael Hudson when you were talking about that the U.S. even before the Iranian Revolution was thinking strongly about conquering Iran and just taking the oil.
Herman Cohen?
Herman Cohen, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
More questions?
You mentioned U.S. puppets are no longer obedient, and can you elaborate more on exactly who those countries are and how you think they are no longer obedient?
I will give you a few examples. One example is the agreement that happened between two real power rivals in Middle East, Saudi Arabia and Iran. And this happened by the help of Chinese. And right now, something that is brewing is the United Arab Emirates, actually. This is what I'm saying right now is coming from the Wall Street Journal. And the United Arab Emirates started to complain to United States. If the war continues, they cannot afford to fulfill their obligation for the budgetary foreseen. And they have to go to do transaction with China in yuan. You see, these are some kind of the things that you see that will come more and more. Qatar, for example. You see, right now, it used to be a council of the Arab nation in south of Persian Gulf. And this was included Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Qatar, and Kuwait. This type of the alignment is not valid anymore by the pressure of Iranian war. Right now there is a division that is getting more and more wider. One side of division is Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They wanted to get more friendly with Iran because they see the future is better not to involve. Through this, the most hostile nation is United Arab Emirates, because United Arab Emirates, by the wealth that is gathered from all the financial transaction, and it's become some kind of the, for example, Lebanon in the past 15, half of the 20th century was the center of the financial in Middle East. After all this in domestic war, civil war that happened in Lebanon, the financial center in the Middle East moved to Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And by this financial center, they managed to make a lot of prosper. And they use this prosper to extend their power, the political power. Even they go as far as Sudan. They have a lot of meddling in Sudan. There are a lot of proxy forces in Africa fighting on behalf of UAE. So you can see that how much it extends its power. And they are most closer to Israel regarding the alliance, untold alliance, very official alliance with Israel. So through all this, in the facade, you see some kind of alliance, but it's the real world. This alliance is not standing anymore. And so the division right now is between Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Oman, which was very traditional, friendly relationship with Iran. And other side is Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. Bahrain is very important. So I hope that somehow I try to show the picture what's going on. Go ahead.
Next question, we've got Karen and then John.
Well, I'm listening to alternative news sources on YouTube. Michael Hudson's one of them. But what I've been hearing is that the Gulf Cooperation Council you're talking about in the Persian Gulf, of them, Bahrain and Kuwait are pretty much destroyed because of the missiles that Iran has been pounding them with. And that essentially some of these Gulf dictatorship monarchies that are super wealthy, because that's all they really are, oil deserts with, wealthy monarchs. A lot of foreigners are there, and they might just leave, because if they keep getting pounded by Iran, And you could comment on that, please?
Important point you raised. That this is absolutely correct what you mentioned. You see, for example, at the time that Iranian gave the threat to American to leave their bases, a lot of military forces, they left the bases and then went through the hotels. They tried to hide from the attack. And after that, Iranian actually find their location and attack the hotels. That's why you see a lot of hotels being damaged for that. So the main reason right now, Iran telling that if any of these countries give the military help to the hostile enemy of Iran, according to the international law, Iran is allowed to attack these countries. And by the hoping that they wanted to stay away by helping United States. And in my point of view, you might not agree with me, but in my point of view, from now on, it has a certain effect because all these countries that give base and territory and help American bases, they figure out that there is no any defense from United States for their sovereignty. And putting so much expenses and helping United States didn't do any help for themselves. So what's the use, what's the help of giving so much in the dependent of the United States to help them and to defend them? That's why there is a new, you might have heard that, there is a new agreement between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia regarding supporting in case of any possible attack in the future. Pakistan forces would help Saudi Arabia. This is one example. Another example, there are definitely some discussion behind the scene between Chinese and Russia and all these Arab nations. Hopefully it somehow answers your question.
Yeah, oops. But anyway, can you comment on, to me, the propaganda and myths, so-called Iranian developing nuclear weapon?
Yeah, it's a long story.
Yeah,
you see, at least a majority of Iranian people, and especially the policymakers, are abiding by what the late martyred supreme leader talked about that. See, they said that apart from the policy, the real policy that taken by Iran, he gave some kind of the religious mandate not to go by the nuclear war, because it is the mass destruction type of the weapon. And all the people that are coming to investigate and monitor Iranian development in the nuclear energy, and even the people in Pentagon and in the security apparatus of United States told so many times that Iran is not in the plan to make the nuclear energy. And in my point of view, again, this is mostly are propagated and instigated by Israel to give a firm reason to encourage United States to go and help Israel to topple Iranian government. Go ahead.
Hello. Can you tell me if there is any viable democratic opposition in Iran to the current Islamic regime?
First of all, I I do not call Iranian government as Islamic regime because this is condescending. Depends on my own and your own opinion. But there are a lot of contradiction inside Iran, no doubt about that. It's not a country like I think most of the country in the world has an existing opposition. But the issue is that whose side is the majority of the people? This is very important. And the pressure, during the pressure of the war, these 40 years of the war, and you can see through all the picture and the news, how much people is under the pressure. And believe me, during the month of Ramadan, which is the fasting month of Iranian, during the night, all the people gather in the streets supporting Iranian government. So if there is, and it certainly was, a lot of opposition from the people because, as I mentioned through my presentation, there is a lot of pressure, economic pressure on the people, no doubt about that. There is a lot of contradiction inside Iran. But what is the result of these 40 years? The first 12 days and 40 days war, it made Iranian population more united before their government. And I think this is the human nature. What has happened to Iran right now? If it have happened to any other countries in the world, it makes all the population around the flag. Because this is the existential threat to a civilization that somebody, I do not want to name it, wanted to annihilate this civilization. So the rest of that you can connect the dots.
More questions?
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, what was the original...
Hold on, Donna. I know you've got a good voice, but...
The original tie between the 6 countries that were...
in the list of Mr. Clark, you mean?
Yeah, what was the tie?
You mean the timing that it was announced? Oh, the
tie.
Yeah. Basically, there are some government, quote-unquote, rogue government. They do not abide by whatever United States dictate. I will give you one example about Libya, for example. Colonel Gaddafi definitely was a dictator. I wanted to enter through all the contradiction he may have with his country. But an oil-rich country with a small population, and it created a lot of comfort and prosperity for this small population. And you see what happened, and he tried to reach to some agreement with the Western country. You may have heard even, he helped Sarkozy, the previous government, previous president in France, to came up as a president. Right now, the dossier of Mr. Sarkozy came out, and it's proved by the French government that he got the bribe from Gaddafi. So even he wanted to give some bribe to this Western leader, and by the mandate that the Western countries asked him, he actually postponed all the plan that he had to develop the armament, and he gave all the possible nuclear energy that he was pursued at that time. And after this, what happened? So this is the reason. The Somalia is the same as Syria. Syria is especially very interesting. During the war on terror, even Bashar Assad accepted United States to take some of the prisoners and accepted to integrate them inside Syria, because according to the United States law, they could not keep the people without, and because these people has not the citizenship of American, they cannot keep them for a long time and torture them. Even he acted in such a level that he tried to cooperate with United States, and see what was the reason at the end. So.
If you had the pipeline to Washington, what can the United States do starting tomorrow? A couple of steps that we could do to get out of this mess.
I rather you guys answer this question. I have no solution for that, unfortunately, with the present situation, with the commander-in-chief that you have on the top.
Build the anti-war movement.
So it's hopeless.
No, it's not hopeless.
All right. I hope that sometime reason will prevail. Yeah. It's the only thing that I sent.
Hi, my name is Sharon. I was watching an interview between Chris Hedges and Colonel Wilkerson, who is retired military and an expert apparently on especially ground warfare. And Chris Hedges was asking him, the main part of the interview had to do with the possibility of US troops in Iran. But the first part of the interview, Wilkerson was talking about how American people don't understand that a lot of the new war is really against China. And he was talking about the Belt and Road Initiative and the railroads that are going through Iran from China to Europe. I was amazed. 16 hours of fast trains delivering freight from China to Europe through Iran. And maybe you could comment on that development.
Very important point, Sharon, you mentioned. Very important point you mentioned. For example, let me give you an example. There is a very small strip of land in the north of Afghanistan, which get to the border with China directly without passing to any other countries. Very narrow, just one small road. And if I'm not mistaken, in one point of time, like 1 or 2 years ago, Taliban gave Iranian access to this road. So just by passing the Afghanistan, Iranian can reach directly to China. So I heard in the news that even if everything from the martial side would be closed or would be blocked, there is the possibility, not in the same capacity, of course, that the martial way can deliver the oil. And I have heard, these are something that really is not 100%, you can look at as a rumor, because of a lot of fake news actually going on. But what I have heard is that even this United States blockade is not included the oil tanks. Somehow United States allowed the Iranian oil tanks to pass, not to jeopardize that level the oil market. And you can see how much this fluctuation of the price of oil. At the first sight, you said that this is a chaos, but for some people, some top capitalists, is not chaos, is the rule of the game. Each time that it fluctuates, you see how much money would be poured in the pocket of some people. If we have an industrial type of the capitalism here in the United States, it's something that put this country as the highest, most industrial, sometimes in the 1970s. Right now, by the deindustrialization of the economy in the United States, we are totally in different paradigm in capitalism. All is financial capitalism. And for the financial capitalism, this type of the chaos is the rule of the day. This is the way that they get profit on that. For industrial capitalists, they need to plan ahead of time. You want to know where is your raw material will come, and you expect to have at least more or less a few fluctuations, stay constant expenses for the at least next 6 months. But for the speculated capitalism, this is, if you know that the price of the oil is fluctuated, this is the best time, the high time for you to get profit. And if you have some kind of inside information, then good for you.
I heard that Baron Trump is now worth something like $80 or $100 million. I haven't verified that yet, but I heard it. But okay, I think last question.
Could you tell us briefly about yourself, where you grew up, the last time you were in Iran, and could people go to Iran? I mean, we're just not familiar with that kind of thing.
Let me start from last part. Your question that when I plan to go to Iran. Actually, me and my wife actually reserved flight ticket to go to Iran, but right now British Airlines canceled our flight. And we are totally, be honest to you, we are looking to go back to Iran. This is the answer and the last one. But a few things about my past. I graduated all my, after high school education was done in Iran. I have the Bachelor of Science degree, Master of Science also in electrical engineer. I was working, I migrated to United States in, at the same time that Khatami, I mentioned through that, in 1997, my wife helping my memory. In 97, we came to Iran, and from that moment that I came to Iran, I was working in my profession, which is electrical engineer. I'm retired here, yeah. And basically, and because my family lives there, it happened some year that I go there for 3 times or something like that. So our relationship with Iran is not interrupted, like a lot of diaspora that you can see here. And something that may worth to mention to you guys, you can see a lot of noises, big mouth noises that coming from diaspora against and asking appreciation for Mr. Uncle Trump. Thank you, please bomb Iran. This is not something that the majority of the Iranian diaspora has in their mind. But unfortunately, we do not have that big mouth as they have, and definitely we do not have the support of the United States government. You may have heard a guy who was graduated here, and he was pursuing his doctorate here, and he was a commentator that for several times he's being invited by BBC in British or some other Western news media. He was arrested by the ICE by the totally unfounded reason that his visa is something, and he was living here from during Obama he came here on the studying visa. So this is the situation.
Well, thank you very much, Farshid. Very informative. Thanks a lot for coming out today, and I hope some people will explore a little bit of the information on the handout we gave. I think you'll be surprised that what's going on is totally contrary to what Washington is saying. So check it out, please. Thanks a lot for coming, everybody.